Good morning everybody, and well, Hollow Knight is a great game. Well, video over. Okay, no, not really. However, I'm sure it's a real surprise to hear a Zelda fan hear that, as I feel like the little silly bug game with a protagonist that doesn't talk and a bigger sense of adventure probably overlaps quite a lot with the Zelda fandom, where of course we have spent a lot of time doing LEGO Zelda builds. So naturally, is what happens when I have an interest in something, I immediately try and build it in LEGO. And while I have a penchant for playsets and things of a small scale, unfortunately that was not my first choice this time around. Over the years I have developed a little bit of an itch for creature building, and when I was building my K2SO from the 2025 set, I got really quite jealous, I suppose, of the designer's ability to amazingly sculpt these really intricate shapes, and I decided I wanted to have another piece of that pie. The Frogs and Gleeok were not enough for me. So, as with most cases, I decided to try a character building scale to turn some of my favourite Hollow Knight creatures and bosses into builds that I could have on my desk, like a true kleptomaniac fan. While it's safe to say that many people have tried the Knight over the years, I wanted to do something a little bit different, as is always the case, because I have a compulsion to stand out, and that of course led me to a brand new scale. And this was the scale at which I set all of the builds up for today. But let's wind back a bit. How did this all happen? Well, after years of putting it off because I have what is called a gamer skill issue, I was finally convinced into playing Hollow Knight after I saw Jayfa Mocs' builds when talking with the minifig Who back in September, and it was actually him, although he's never played the game, that finally convinced me to give this a go and start playing the game, purely because I saw cool builds and I realized, hey wait, what if I don't have a skill issue? I should just try the game. Everyone seems to love it, and as is usually the case with people that try Hollow Knight, yes, they immediately fall in love with the game. Now don't get me wrong, I definitely do have a gamer skill issue, and I will certainly not be playing Silksong anytime soon, but the world, the colour, the creativity, and just the really addictive gameplay, despite me sucking, absolutely drew me in, and it wasn't long before I found myself in studio with this quest on hand. Now, as I said, I have a need to be quirky, so in my search around for parts, I came across some new capes that were designed to be hard rubber capes for the LEGO Batman line, and decided that this was my seed part. This was me setting the scale and also giving me an opportunity to try some brand new techniques in order to make a knight at this scale. For those of you who don't know what a seed part it is, the part that you come into a model design with, knowing that this is sort of setting the the model in motion. It's sort of a core element that defines your scale and maybe the style of the build. And for me, that was these Batman capes, which looked a little bit better in studio than they did in real life. However, in real life, we have one big advantage, and that is that we can arrange these to make them flow around the knight better. With this choice out of the way, it was set on chance to try and find a way to attach them all together, and then of course to curve the head in the most accurate way I could possibly think of. Now with models like this, there is always by nature going to be a compromise. However, for me, there were a couple of big things that I wanted to get right. One, I wanted to play with my knowledge of the snot system, that studs knot on top building, to try and recreate as many of the angles as possible, as accurately as possible. Secondly, of course, I knew I wanted to stick to the scale established with the capes. And three, I knew I wanted to get the accurate eye shape with the different curves at the bottom of the head and then the slightly sharper curves at the top of the head. And that is what makes this version of the knight stand out, as there are plenty out there, including some that have been stolen. This version therefore has the ovular eye shape as well as the roundness at the bottom and then the squares at the top. One of the big problems we came across though while designing the knight was that a lot of the reference images look different from different angles, because of course this is a 2D animation and of course a really curvy game, just like the Zelda franchise there. There were lots of different angles that were just impossible to capture. So really excitingly, I got to make use of a lot of brand new parts of the LEGO catalogue, thanks of course courtesy mostly to the Speed Champions line, who are really working overtime to create some really fantastic new molds that quite often I have derived and turned my nose up to. However, in this project with Hollow Knight here, it became incredibly useful. Of course, the other big problem with these character designs is that they all have very spindly limbs and legs, meaning they are all going to need bases to stand on, and unfortunately today for the knight we just have this big brick. I will be rounding this out with a sort of more sloped design eventually. However, I just wasn't sure how quite top heavy he was going to be, which of course is the problem with having spindly legs. You'll see that later on when we move on to our second character, that this was a little bit detrimental. I was also a little bit worried about the neck connection, however that's turned out to be pretty stable, although let's not push it too far. And then of course angling the horns and scaling them to a correct thickness and shape was also a particular challenge, as you can see here. Adding our nail finished off our knight, and I really do think they turned out wonderfully. Although, of course, I had to make a compromise, and that was in the form of having the eyes stick out the front of the head. You may think I might be able to inset this, however, trust me, it is not possible with the parts that we've currently used, although it is something I would like to look into as the LEGO part catalogue developed. And of course, while there are some compromises, I was really happy with the design and getting to sort of stretch my building muscles just a little bit more to create some really fun angles. However, I was not satisfied. Continuing with my theme of being different, I wanted to tackle a boss that I knew not many people would have, because it's not many people's favourite. However, I have a very strong attachment to the wonderful Hive Knight. All those little noises they make, as well as, of course, all of the buzzing and the moves. It was a really flowy fight for me, and although that run back is absolutely painful, it absolutely stole my heart as a favourite antagonist across the game, and was also the first one that I beat on Radiant. Hive Knight presented an interesting challenge because I knew I now had to keep in scale with the Knight, which meant a bigger build, a fluffier build, and also some strange angles around the head. But we will come back to that, as of course I started off with, once again, a very specific seed part in mind. This was the sort of angled 3x2 wedge here that you see on the side, as I knew this would be a great way to get the curves of the Hive Knight's body. And I really wanted to make sure that there was an articulation running through the central spine that allowed you to twist and turn in order to get a much more dynamic pose. From here, we worked out was to get a decent thickness and moved up towards the neck, where I had great time using these brand new curved elements here for the shoulder elements, for his little armor, and then of course made some arms and legs. I'd later go back to make a version of these legs that would be posable. You may notice, of course, that this build is still in its digital form, as while I speed ran my way to having the Knight in physical form, the Hive Knight and the other build you're going to see are still on my Bricklink wanted list, so they will be coming, and there'll be another video about them made at some point in the future. Moving to the head, this is where we had the trouble for Hive Knight, as its eyes are specifically at quite an awkward shape and angle, and of course the top of the Hive Knight is furry. There was also one other feature that I knew I wanted to squeeze in, and that of course was the bee scream, which is the most insane and disturbing thing to come out of the game in quite a while, I think. However, unfortunately, I was not able to squeeze this in as something that you can switch between without having to basically change the entire head. However, here you can see it does work, it is possible. Getting that shaping on the head, which is, I can only describe as a dome on a ice cream, like a melting ice cream dome, I think is the best way to describe it, was also particularly tricky. And while I originally tried a couple of brickbook solutions, the final solution chosen was the Aunt Marge leg dome from the Harry Potter Privet Drive Escape, which is unfortunately is actually available on Bricks and Pieces at the moment, which is fantastic, as otherwise that would be a particularly difficult part to get hold of. However, it comes with these great Technic holes in the top, which allow me to attach my big antenna. And then in the end, we settled on a various angle technique to get the eyes at the right distance. My initial version was a little bit more stable, as I was really trying to make sure I had some nice, stable, satisfying snot interiors for these builds, as I wanted them to feel good to put together, as that was my big development challenge for these models. However, in the end, the less stable version, and hopefully or still stable enough version, gave me just a little bit better angle, and our nose will look less prominent in real life. So I know it's not a perfect rendition, but remember, this is a compromised medium. Of course, with Hive Knight under our belt, we moved on to another character, as I had recently built Nightmare King Grimm, which again is another fantastic boss and of course a fan favourite, although I was trying to stay away from those. If anyone's curious, here is my boss ranking. I have to point out the absolute abysmal time that Godtamer gave me, and why she is in the bottom of bottom tiers and is the worst thing ever created, and I have not the slightest bit of sympathy for such a barbaric bug. Also, Solra is down here, not because he's easy, but because he gave me way too much trouble on the first problem through. And then of course at the top is Grimm, who again presented plenty of challenges. Interestingly enough, this time there was no seed part. I had an idea about how I was going to tackle certain shapes, but I knew that the head would be the most difficult thing to capture. From the start, I knew that Grimm was the one I wanted to pair with the Knight, specifically having the Knight dodging over the bat attacks like you see in both the Nightmare King and Troopmaster forms of the encounter. I also knew I wanted to stick with the Troopmaster colour scheme, as while the Nightmare King is cool and has absolutely amazing music, I think it's the Troopmaster which is the more iconic design. This would mean that I'd have one of the wings open and the cape flowing, which would present different challenges for later, but also meant I had to be able to pose and angle the head in the correct angle. I also have not finished the stand that these two are going to go on. Eventually I want to have the pair of them at a convention together, but that is going to take a little bit more planning about how to make the Knight sort of fly, and I thought let's just stick to the characters for now. Grimm is also taller than the others, so again this was another scale test, and I ended up using these different wedge plates at an angle in coral for the eyes here to sort of angle them at the right place. From here I was building off an octagonal core, really getting to use my various different snot techniques, and I'm very excited to try this one in real life, just again to see if it's stable, to see if it's satisfying to put together. Remember that K2SO build was my standard, my golden standard that I was very much looking up to. From there, of course, we then spiraled out to the cape, again keeping this really thin body, and I think Grimm's legs are probably just a little bit too thin, and again we'll have to wait and see, but I think I'm going to be adding a transparent support to the back of him in order to just give him that little bit of extra poof. Using lots of tiles and snot techniques, we were able to get the wing out here, and I really hope these are satisfying, because as I mentioned, I wanted the builds to be good to put together, and maybe that won't be the case when I try Grimm's head and the Hive Knight's face. However, we will hopefully wait and see, and hopefully I've learned something from K2 and able to sort of put together in builds, because I really do think it's an impressive skill to be able to create this really solid core that has all these angles coming off it, and that's something that I definitely want to improve on, because I don't think I'm done with Hollow Knight builds. Either way, Grimm looks fantastic and amazingly cool, and again really showing this unique skill, as while there have been again plenty of really great Grimm builds, I don't believe there's been any add-on at this scale, and of course not many that will be tested IRL. So who is next? Well, I think next up for me is Traitor Lord and Hornet. Hornet has a really interesting seed part that I want to experiment with, that being the Bugs Bunny eye element from the new Easter set here, and I think this would make a perfect Hornet eye. So I really want to try Hornet at that scale, as I think it will suit Knight quite well, although I'm not quite sure how I want to do a cloak yet, because the Doctor Strange cloaks won't work at this larger scale. Then, as I mentioned, Traitor Lord is another fight I feel is particularly satisfying, and also would add a bit of green to this lineup, sort of rounding out my sort of main 5. And maybe I'll go on from there. Let's not say that I'm going to do every boss just yet, because quite frankly I think that is a bit of an overstretch, and also I don't want to go near Godtamer with a 10-foot pole. Also, some of these have been done amazingly by other people. I just want to play around with the ones that I think are cool and the fights that I enjoy. I mean, I'm probably going to change my mind, right? There's no way that once I beat Pantheon 3, I'm not looking at you Godtamer, but Grey Prince though, I can do it. I know I can do it. That I will not be tempted to do the Pure Vessel. I'm almost certain. So we will see how long this one goes on for, but look forward to seeing Hive Knight and so on in the future. In conclusion, I think it's worth noting that once again, Hollow Knight is a fantastic game, and if you've been at all tempted to try it, or you think that these creature designs are cool, I would highly recommend. If you're wondering where it sits in my all-time game ranking, here you go. Here is the sort of top portion of the tier list. Obviously, I've played more games, but these are my pantheon, so to speak. And I really love my time with the game, and as you can see, I've fallen in deep into the hole. I'm not done with it. I'm going for speedrun achievements. We have now a knight on my shelf, and I also have this little guy which I hand knitted myself as well. So let me know which boss or creature you would like to see me tackle next. Let me know if you think this new style works, and if you think these new techniques are interesting. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at the knight, as well as the Nightmare King, and of course Hive Knight 2. Who could forget? And I will see you guys all again very, very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.